The stranger fixed my bike out of kindness, or so I thought. But his confession moments later left me questioning my straight identity in ways I never imagined possible. It was a typical Tuesday afternoon in Denver, Colorado, the kind where the Rocky Mountains loom in the distance like silent guardians over the bustling city streets. I was pedaling home from my marketing job at a downtown ad firm, my old mountain bike rattling beneath me after a long day of client meetings and endless emails. Suddenly the chain snapped with a sharp metallic clank, and I swerved to the curb, nearly toppling over in the middle of the busy intersection near Washington Park. Cars honked as I stood there, frustrated, sweat dripping down my back under the warm Colorado sun, my hands already greasy from trying to fix the mess myself. I was 28, single again after my 3-year relationship with Emily had fizzled out 6 months earlier, and the last thing I needed was a broken bike adding to my pile of everyday problems. That's when he pulled up, a tall, fit guy around 30 with short brown hair, a light stubble, and an easy, confident smile, riding a sleek red road bike that looked like it belonged in a professional race. He hopped off without hesitation, slinging a small tool bag from his shoulder. "Hey man, looks like you could use a hand with that," he said, his voice warm and steady like we were old friends. I hesitated for a second, but the traffic was picking up and I didn't have a clue what I was doing, so I nodded. "Yeah, thanks, I'm John, by the way." He introduced himself as David, explaining that he owned a small bike repair shop just a few blocks away and spent most weekends cycling the mountain trails outside the city. As he crouched down beside the bike, his hands moving with practiced ease, I found myself chatting to fill the awkward silence. I told him about my job, the pressure of hitting quarterly targets, and how my recent breakup with Emily had left me feeling adrift, like I was going through the motions without really knowing what I wanted next. David listened, nodding thoughtfully, sharing bits about his own life, how he'd moved to Denver 5 years ago from a small town in Nebraska to escape the narrow-minded views back home, and how biking helped him clear his head. He worked quickly, tightening the chain, adjusting the gears, and even lubing the moving parts with a small bottle from his bag. In under 20 minutes, the bike was rolling smoothly again, better than before. I pulled out my wallet, insisting on paying him something, but he waved it off with a genuine laugh. "No need, brother, just a kind gesture. We've all been there when the bike decides to quit on you." His kindness felt refreshing in a city where everyone seemed rushed and guarded. I shook his hand firmly, thanking him again, and turned to hop back on, ready to put the whole incident behind me and head home to my quiet apartment in Capitol Hill. But as I swung my leg over the frame, David paused, his expression shifting from casual to something more serious. "Hey John, before you go, there's something I need to say. From the moment I saw you struggling there, I felt this pull, like we connected on a level I can't ignore. I'm gay, and I think you might be feeling something similar, even if you don't realize it yet." The words hit me like a cold wave in the mountain air. I froze, one foot still on the pedal, my mind blanking out completely. His confession hung between us, raw and direct, no room for misinterpretation. I muttered something incoherent about needing to go, pulled away sharply, and pedaled off as fast as the freshly fixed bike would carry me. My heart hammered against my ribs, the Denver streets blurring past as questions flooded in. Me, straight John, who had only ever dated women, now standing here rattled by a stranger's honest words after nothing more than a bike fix? It didn't make sense. By the time I reached my apartment building, the sun was dipping lower, casting long shadows across the brick walls. I locked the bike outside, hands still shaking, and climbed the stairs 2 at a time, desperate for the quiet of my living room. But even there, surrounded by my familiar couch and the half-empty coffee mug from morning, the confession echoed. I poured myself a glass of water, staring out the window at the city lights flickering on, and tried to laugh it off. Just a weird encounter, right? David was probably just bold, and I was tired. Yet deep down, a small crack had formed in the version of myself I had always accepted without question. That night's sleep evaded me as I tossed and turned, replaying every word, every glance from the roadside. The kindness that started it all now felt like the beginning of something far more complicated, and I had no idea how to face it. The next morning, I woke up with David's words still ringing in my ears like an alarm I couldn't snooze. I dragged myself to the office, trying to bury the confusion under spreadsheets and campaign briefs, but my focus kept slipping. My coworker Mike noticed during our lunch break in the break room. "You look like you saw a ghost, man, what's up?" he asked, biting into his sandwich. I hesitated, then gave a vague version of the bike story, omitting the confession part. Mike laughed it off immediately. "Dude, some guys are just overly friendly, especially in this city. Don't overthink it, you're straight as an arrow, remember." His casual dismissal should have comforted me, but instead it left me feeling more isolated, like I was carrying a secret I didn't even understand. Back at my desk, I stared at the computer screen, my mind drifting to David's easy smile and the way his eyes had held mine with such certainty. That evening, I avoided the usual route home, taking the long way through the park to steer clear of the spot where it happened. But fate had other plans. As I locked my bike outside a corner cafe for a quick espresso there, he was David sitting at an outdoor table reading a book with a coffee in hand. Our eyes met and he offered a small wave, no pressure, just acknowledgement. My stomach twisted, but something pulled me over. "Hey, about yesterday." I started awkwardly, standing there with my hands in my pockets. David closed his book and looked up calmly. "I'm sorry if I came on too strong, John. I didn't mean to freak you out. I just go with my gut, and it told me there was something there worth exploring." He explained how he had dealt with his own identity years ago, coming out in a conservative family that eventually distanced themselves. "It's not easy, but pretending only makes it harder in the end." His honesty disarmed me, and for the first time I admitted out loud that his words had shaken me more than I expected. We talked for nearly an hour about nothing heavy at first: sports, the best trails around Denver, my job stress. Yet underneath I felt a pull I couldn't name, a curiosity mixed with fear. When I finally left the cafe, the confusion had only deepened. Back home, I called my sister in Boulder, hoping for some normal conversation, but when she asked if I was seeing anyone new, I froze and changed the subject to her kids. That night, I lay in bed scrolling through old photos of Emily, trying to convince myself everything was the same as always. But David's confession lingered like a shadow, refusing to fade. The next few days blurred into a routine of avoidance. I changed my commute, took the bus instead of biking, and threw myself into work projects to drown out the questions. Yet every quiet moment brought them back stronger. Was I really straight if one man's words could unsettle me this much? The internal battle grew exhausting, and I knew deep down that ignoring it wouldn't make it disappear. One afternoon, after a particularly rough meeting, I found myself riding past David's bike shop almost on autopilot. I didn't stop, but the sight of the open garage door and his familiar figure inside working on a wheel made my chest tighten. The kindness that had started everything was now the catalyst for a crisis I wasn't sure I could handle alone. Weeks passed, and the confusion turned into a constant undercurrent in my life, pulling at every decision I made. I tried dating again, setting up a coffee meet with a woman from work named Rachel, hoping it would reset everything. We laughed over lattes, and she was kind, smart, with a sharp sense of humor, but as we talked I kept comparing the ease of our conversation to the unexpected spark I had felt with David. The date ended politely with no second plans, and I walked away feeling emptier than before. That weekend, my parents drove down from their suburban home outside Denver for a visit, the kind of family gathering that usually grounded me. Mom hugged me tight, asking the usual questions about work and whether I had met anyone special, while Dad clapped me on the back talking about the Broncos game. Over dinner, the conversation turned to my cousin's recent wedding, and Mom sighed. "We just want you settled, John, with a nice girl and a family like we had." Her words carried the weight of their traditional values, the same ones that had shaped my entire upbringing in a small Colorado town where being different wasn't discussed. I smiled and nodded, but inside the pressure built like a storm cloud. Later that night, after they left, I sat on my balcony staring at the city skyline and dialed an old college friend who had come out years ago. He listened without judgment as I finally voiced the confession that had started it all. "It doesn't mean you have to label yourself tomorrow, John, but give yourself permission to feel what you feel," he advised. His words offered a lifeline, yet the fear of disappointing my family kept me anchored in denial. Monday morning, I found myself biking past David's shop again, this time slowing down. He spotted me and stepped out, wiping his hands on a rag. "John, good to see you," he said simply, no pressure in his tone. We ended up talking for 20 minutes about a new trail he had discovered, and before I knew it, I agreed to a casual group ride that weekend with some of his cycling friends. It felt safe, neutral, but as I rode away, the excitement mixed with dread. The group ride turned out to be just what I needed at first: laughter and fresh air, pushing the heavy thoughts aside. David was easygoing with everyone, yet I caught myself watching him more than the scenery, the way he handled his bike with quiet confidence. On a break by a mountain stream, he sat beside me and we talked deeper about family expectations. He shared how his own parents had struggled with his coming out, but eventually found a fragile peace. "It's not about losing them, John, it's about showing them who you really are," he said gently. His words lingered as we rode back into the city, and for the first time I didn't run from the conversation. But back home, the misunderstanding hit when Mike from work texted asking about my weekend, and I casually mentioned the ride without details. His reply came quick. "Dude, hanging with that crowd now? Careful, you don't want people getting the wrong idea." The judgment stung sharper than I expected, highlighting the societal pressures I had always taken for granted. That night, the internal conflict raged stronger than ever. David's kindness had opened a door I couldn't close, and the choices ahead felt both terrifying and inevitable. The tension built slowly, like the gathering of storm clouds over the Front Range. I started meeting David more often, not as dates, but as friends, sharing bike rides through the city parks and late coffees, where conversations flowed from surface topics to deeper ones about dreams and regrets. He never pushed, never repeated the confession, but his presence alone made me question everything. One evening after a long ride, we stopped at a quiet overlook, and he opened up about a past relationship that had ended because his partner couldn't handle the family backlash. "I learned that hiding who I am only hurt more in the long run," he said, his voice steady but laced with old pain. I nodded, sharing fragments of my own fears, the way my parents' expectations had always defined my path. For the first time I felt seen without judgment, and that scared me more than anything. Yet misunderstandings crept in. At work, a colleague saw me talking with David outside the office during lunch and later joked in the break room about my new buddy. The comment was light, but Mike pulled me aside later, his tone serious. "People talk, John, just saying. You've got a reputation to keep if you want that promotion." His words echoed the prejudice I had grown up around, and I lashed out, defensively claiming it was nothing. That night, I texted David canceling our planned ride, the guilt twisting inside me like a betrayal. He replied simply, "No worries, hope you're okay." But I could sense the hurt behind the words. The sacrifice felt necessary to protect the life I knew, but it left me hollow. Family pressure mounted when my parents announced a surprise visit for my birthday. Mom brought homemade pie and Dad grilled steaks on my tiny balcony while probing about my dating life. "You're not getting any younger, son," Dad said, half joking, but the underlying expectation was clear. I smiled through it all, but inside the crisis deepened. Later that evening, alone, I stared at my phone, debating whether to reach out to David. The internal battle peaked when I finally drove to his shop unannounced. He was closing up and looked surprised but welcomed me in. We talked for hours about the misunderstanding and my fears. "I get it, John, taking time is okay, but don't shut me out completely," he said with quiet understanding. His grace only intensified my confusion. As I left that night, the weight of societal judgment and family loyalty clashed with the growing pull toward authenticity. The choices ahead demanded sacrifice, and I wasn't sure I had the strength yet, but running was no longer an option. The turning point arrived on a crisp autumn morning when everything collided at once. I had spent the previous weeks in a fog of avoidance and half-hearted attempts to prove my old self still existed. Another date with Rachel ended early when I couldn't stop thinking about David's laugh during our last ride. At work, the promotion I had chased for months came with a catch: a team-building retreat where casual conversations turned personal, and Mike's subtle warnings about fitting in grew louder. The pressure from every side felt suffocating, like the thin mountain air on a high pass. Then came the phone call from Mom, her voice tight with worry. "Your cousin mentioned seeing you with some guy downtown, John. Is everything okay? We just want what's best for you." The disappointment in her tone cut deep, reminding me of all the Sunday dinners and holiday traditions built on unspoken expectations. I hung up shaking and for the first time allowed myself to cry alone in my apartment, the tears releasing years of buried doubt. That afternoon I rode straight to David's shop without calling ahead, my heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. He was organizing tools in the back when I walked in, and the surprise on his face quickly softened into concern as I poured out everything the family call the work gossip, the sleepless nights. "I'm scared, David, of losing them, of losing the life I knew, but I can't keep pretending this feeling isn't real," I admitted, my voice cracking. He listened without interrupting, then shared his own story of sacrifice, how coming out had cost him holidays with family but gained him a community that accepted him fully. "You don't have to choose between them and yourself, John, but you do have to choose honesty," he said, taking my hand for the first time since the initial confession. The touch grounded me, and in that moment the awakening began, not dramatic but quiet and profound. We spent the evening talking through the practical steps, the conversation I needed to have with my parents, the boundaries I would set at work. Misunderstandings from before surfaced, and we cleared them with honesty, David admitting he had felt rejected when I canceled but understood my fear. The high point came when we stepped outside into the cooling Denver night, and he simply said, "Whatever you decide, I'm here as a friend first." His patience gave me the courage I needed. The next day I called my parents, inviting them for a serious talk, the kind that would either strengthen our bond or test it beyond repair. The sacrifice loomed large, but so did the possibility of freedom. As I hung up the phone, a new clarity settled over me. The emotional journey that started with a broken bike chain had led me to the edge of my true self, and I was finally ready to step forward. The conversation with my parents unfolded in the living room of their suburban home, the same space where I had grown up learning right from wrong. Dad sat stone-faced at first, Mom twisting her hands in her lap as I spoke the words I had rehearsed for days. "I've been questioning a lot lately about who I am, and I've met someone, David, who makes me feel seen in a way I never expected. I'm not sure what it all means yet, but I need you to know this is real for me." The silence that followed stretched heavy with years of unspoken norms. Mom's eyes filled with tears, but she reached across the table, taking my hand. "We love you, John, no matter what. It'll take time for us to understand, but we're not losing you." Dad nodded slowly, his voice gruff. "It's not the path we pictured, son, but if it's your path, we'll walk it with you." The relief washed over me like a mountain stream, washing away the fear that had held me back. Not everything was resolved. There would be awkward holidays and careful explanations, but the bridge remained intact, a testament to the growth we all needed. Back in Denver, life shifted gradually. I introduced David to my close circle, starting with my sister, who welcomed him with open arms. At work, I set boundaries with Mike, focusing on my performance rather than rumors, and surprisingly, the promotion came through anyway. David and I continued building slowly, bike rides turning into weekend hikes, shared meals, and quiet evenings where laughter came easily. The misunderstandings that once threatened us became stories we laughed about. The time I canceled our ride, the awkward cafe encounter. Through it all, his steady presence taught me that love between men wasn't about grand gestures, but the daily choice to show up honestly. One golden evening, as we stood at the same overlook where our deeper talks had begun, David turned to me. "You've come so far, John, and I'm proud to walk beside you." In that moment, the happiness I had glimpsed in fleeting thoughts became real, warm, and lasting. The journey hadn't been easy, marked by internal storms, family tests, and societal whispers, but each step had forged a stronger version of myself. David and I stood together, not as strangers who met over a broken bike, but as partners navigating the complexities of life with open hearts. The city lights of Denver sparkled below us, a reminder that even the smallest act of kindness could lead to the greatest awakening. Looking back at the man I used to be and the one I had become, I felt a profound gratitude for the confusion that had started it all. True or false? True love always requires risking the comfort of your old life to fully embrace who you really are.